Turns out he's a major cinephile.
They don't watch enough movies. It's a very simple formula.
And here we go. Hello, and welcome once again to another episode of Nick Nack Goes to the Movies. It has been, honestly, it's been a time. I chalk it up to busy vacation from the Midwest, leading up to that, a busier chunk of work with drafts and even getting a potential concussion. But during all that, I was able to watch a ton of Tuesday night discount movies at Marcus Theaters and got a few has been a while experiences at other theater chains, including both Reading Cinemas and AMC. So yes, I was finally able to see in person the whole Nicole Kidman's in the theater saying her declaration and the movie viewer theater anthem that we all needed. We do make movies better. It was magical. I love Greg and the Marcus movies, but until I get into one of those pre-movie commercials, that Nicole Kidman one will have my heart. Hit me up on my socials, Marcus Theaters, Greg, or any representatives. I would love to meet up in Wisconsin to star in front of the camera with you, my boy Greg. So today it is another mixed bag, I'd say Catchup, but shoot, some of these are even on streaming services now. It's an episode with just a ton of things, a little bit of a mixed bag all over the place that I've seen in theaters as of late. Each movie was in a different theater type, and while AMC has some cool giveaway purchases, really bummed out I didn't get that Dungeons & Dragons D20 die popcorn holder. Like, there just aren't those things available at my local theaters, and the food options, they definitely have some cool ones at AMC. But since I'm not a huge movie snacker on my continued weight loss journey overall, the best of the three still has to be Marcus Theaters in Green Bay, West Side, with the super comfy, fully reclinable seats. But to the movies to be discussed, not just talking about movie theater chains and ranking those, that could be another episode. Now that that's all out of the way, though, we got a superhero sequel. Probably had the one with the least amount of hype going into it, Shazam, Fury of the Gods. The latest and apparently one of the most successful video game adaptations and animated movies of our era, the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And lastly, we had a movie adaptation based on one of the nerdier activities out there that you can be a part of. I was more of a Magic the Gathering kid. I got my card, so maybe you'll see me at the local Magic the Gathering scene now again, TBD. I gotta learn the rules again, though. That is for sure. Those are somewhat aloof in my mind now since it's been so long. But this movie instead is based on Dungeons & Dragons with Honor Among Thieves. But let's start with something that could be a super time, you know. And look, you guys know I love superhero movies. This should be super exciting. But I wasn't quite sure with the Shazam sequel. Look, Zachary Levi, very fun in the first one as the superhero alter ego Shazam. And I thought that first movie had a cute story about finding a family who you have and not just being born into one. It also had Mark Strong as a pretty fun villain, Dr. Savannah. He may not have been perfect, but overall this movie was fun enough and got the job done. Now, with the sequel outside of Levi, there was not really any actors that I would say drew me in or stood out outside of the more pronounced role for, and honestly a stronger role for Jaimun Hanso as the Wizard compared to the first movie. I really do feel like he's more well utilized in this overall. I don't think Asher Angel did as much for me in the sequel in Billy Batson form instead of the Shazam role. I think Jack Dylan Grazer as Freddie Freeman has a more interesting arc of wanting to be on his own, and that theme was good, but the execution of that whole, and that was honestly a big part of the movie, was just not there for me as much as it felt like the whole family vibe worked in the first one, which still had, we'll get to the CGI problems of being overloaded in both this movie and a little bit in the prequel first one as well. And while it doesn't matter as much in the grand scheme of the plot, it's always fun to see actors, you know, from kind of niche other roles. And DJ Catrona again, it's been ages since I stumbled upon his From Dusk Till Dawn show performance, and I should have finished that at some point, especially with all these streaming services losing things. I already got a little screwed out of not being able to finish Black Sails because Hulu pulled it down, which feels like Swamp Thing all over again, HBO. So it's almost like you gotta rush through your shows before you lose them for who knows how long. So unfortunate. Same with Cooper Andrews and needing to finish The Walking Dead. With all these spin-offs coming at some point, I feel like I need to really bite the bullet on just getting through that last season. Who knows if I'm a season 2 behind on Fear, and like I said, spin-offs are plenty to keep track of. Love my zombie stuff. Hey, speaking of zombie stuff, All of Us Are Dead is getting a season 2 on Netflix. Cannot wait. South Korea is killing it in zombie content. I mean, gosh dang, like they're whipping up some good stuff over there. You know, that's all I'm saying. Jeez. It's been a while. So I'm going to be a little less specific. I think I've forgotten some parts, maybe many parts of this movie, especially compared to the first one. But I definitely remember the staff granting powers being broken at the end of the last one was for sure a big plot point of the movie, right? The wizard staff was a power thing, and being chosen as a champion rejected, and that's his villain arc for Mark Strong's character. There's a lot of lore packed into these two movies. The first one was CGI creatures that were the 7 Deadly Sins, and I do love 7 Deadly Sin content. The last one, not as good. Look, I was just talking about someone about 7, of course, touched on that. Dante's Inferno. Of course, you all know about the, feels like a lifetime ago, because it probably was, Italian poet Dante Alighieri. I hope I'm saying that last name right, and I am not going to look it up to fix it if it is. Dante's Inferno, like Italian poetry, a little gothic in there. Check it out. Might do a little more than maybe the first Shazam did for that topic matter. In this movie, though, we have god characters that we've never really heard about before. And now they're just some god's daughters as the villains here who want to either bring back their world or destroy Earth. It's an ever-changing goal, and it's a bit unclear. But the staff will something tree of life, I guess. That's the tough part when you make a movie. You can't make it with a sequel and deep lore in mind necessarily, because you don't know if you're going to get a second one. There's many examples of that happening, obviously. But when you try to shoehorn lore in after the fact, that's when that's a little tough. It didn't really work when Halloween and Friday the 13th tried it, did it? Nope, sure didn't. Sure didn't. But this movie does have something go for it that a lot of others don't. And it's probably the reason why, and I'm pretty far behind probably on the CW's Superman Lois show too, but like the whole family of superheroes concept really hasn't been shown in a lot of visual live action media that I think would be appealing to people and kind of show that dynamic. And it's not fully family yet in this movie. By the end, it kind of gets there a little bit, but it's a different kind of story, which it always has, something new to mix up the formula. I don't think superhero fatigue in movies and shows exists yet. A lot of people do. It might be a little disproved with the Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which we'll talk about at some point. Not this episode, though. Heck no, too many things to get through before we get to that. But it is kind of fun seeing, a family of superheroes and how media coverage in the world reacts to that. And there's always something kind of fun about, it's going to be quirky, the kids in adult bodies thing. And that was always the case with, Shazam in the DC animated shows that I absolutely remember. Now, they didn't really get much deeper into the Shazam lore outside of that concept, but it always was a neat concept seeing it with one person interacting with a bunch of adults. Now, could it be a little different with a bunch of kids in the adult body thing interacting together? Could be a little much, right? Seeing so many characters with that interacting with each other. Where the first movie was coming together with family, this one was about letting them go, kind of, the empty nester off to college thing, kind of that, that was touched on in the first movie. And it's an interesting, concept in its own, right? It's a thing that could be great for, teens moving off into another phase of their life, or like parents becoming empty nesters. There's some interesting ideas in there. From here, honestly, I'm never really drawn into a lot of this movie outside of that baseline concept, which does sound like a cool concept. There's a ton of back and forth about, going after some mythical relic and who is imprisoned by who. There are some fun character pairings. The standout moment for me probably is seeing the Wizard and Freddy, who no one probably expected, but there were some interesting and fun moments between them. This movie and the first one had, honestly, some pretty good jokes and heartwarming moments in there as well. This one, I would say, comparatively, had less heartwarming moments, more jokes, and I don't think the jokes necessarily landed as well here. Especially now that I've seen Guardians of the Galaxy. It's really comparative now, superhero movies, and they're different, of course, but when you can see something balance it so well, which we'll get into when we talk about that one, you'll know the difference. Stay tuned for my next episode on that too. But I gotta stop talking about Guardians of the Galaxy because I could give some stuff away that I want to wait a little bit. This movie, I just wish leaned into the things that made the first one fun and different. The warm family setup, some of the jokes, and honestly, there was a lot of CGI problems in the last one, of just being a big part of it. Not necessarily problems, but just a lot of it. And both these movies have that problem of just monstrously large CGI nuances. And honestly, this movie had some, I would say, kind of blah, adversity, villain things to deal with. And it's not all bad here. It's just kind of average in general. But the highlight moment, of course, with the youngest of the Shazamily, aka Shazam family, like befriending unicorns, which love the flip of being a much eviler type of creature to help them clean up their Philly city. Okay, that was fun. Like I said, some of the jokes during those moments just don't hit, but you gotta smile a little bit of that, right? Thankfully, somehow, I thought it happened last movie, but it was good to see the Shazam kids open up about their secret powers with their adoptive parents to finally close that circle and have no lies, and have everyone in the end be accepted. Like I said, there are some, nice heartwarming things in this. It's funny having just seen, I did finish it because I was in a rush to finish shows now that I haven't finished yet. Season 2 of The Exorcist does a great job. It's a sadder story, but it does a great job with the adoptive family kind of vibe and stuff that goes in there. Kind of the darker side of the coin there, but it still has a nice ending in the end. But quickly after, there's the big world-ending destruction, which, we've talked about this before, how sometimes superhero movies just throw that in there and that's the end, and it kind of really feels kind of like a cop-out end of just saving the world from generic world-ending destruction. But, there's some growth in there and some stuff happens, some personal growth, character development, all that stuff. But Shazam has to kill himself to save the world, right? Big superhero sacrifice. But I feel like we knew it wasn't going to last long. We knew that about Superman 2, but it felt better there, being more fleshed out, a little more earned. I mean, he was dead for a good chunk of that Justice League movie. The long one. We don't talk about the short one anymore, of course. I've already been through what my few things I like from that. I might even be able to count it on one hand, and it was maybe seeing Batman fight a criminal in Gotham, because we just don't get a lot of that, and we're probably never going to get that with Ben Affleck anymore, depending on what we see of him from the Flash movie and maybe Aquaman 2 now. As much as I'd say the way it happened of saving Shazam was fun, it did feel improbable to a degree. And I think I'll talk on this later in this episode about a different movie, of the concept of bringing someone back and just kind of magically making it happen. That's fun, right? Magic, can always say anything can happen. And we knew that in the first movie, they wanted Superman for a post-credit cameo. And they couldn't get him in the first one. They had a body showing up with the outfit on minus the face. And early in this movie, they did the exact same thing with the Wonder Woman. And like they had some fun with it, but it was almost teasing us about the concept of the faceless cameo. But in the end, she, Gal Gadot, and her like full face voice acting ability not only shows up, but brings back Shazam because they need a god to do it. And, you know, we've talked about her. It's a known lore thing from the first Wonder Woman that she has that power in her. Loved seeing her in there at all, right? What a moment. Great to have the cameo in there. And fun fact, I love superhero media. That's not the fun fact. That's just a fact. But you may not know, maybe I've touched on it, I'm not a huge comic book reader. I've dabbled in a few. I'm reading The Boys. I know it's not very good compared to the media. The media is so much better, but I need a fix every so often for that. And I've still not finished, but I've been in the Walking Dead comics, and I do enjoy those. I think those are both good separate stories. But comic learning thing, Shazam's name is an acronym to the ancient heroes and their powers, including Solomon for wisdom, Hercules strength, Atlas stamina, Zeus power, Achilles courage, and Mercury speed. So how about that little fun historical fiction? And I do like historical fiction, so that did do a little something for me. It is a shame that there is so much confusion about what is to come with the end of the DCEU and the start of the DCU. The same issue with Black Adam, which is interesting, of course, with how these characters are supposed to be tied together, but The Rock did not seemingly want to join into this movie or franchise, even with being the character who he was cast as. But if this is almost swan song time for most of these characters, at least there was some swan song for Wonder Woman and Gal Gadot, especially with how underwhelming her second solo outing was. I mean, there's always a hope that she can appear in the Flash movie, but, you know, pour one out for the DCEU is something I will be a proponent of, especially the Snyder version of it, Aircut. I've said it time and time again. Solo Batman movie would have been cool with Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke. Could have been. Not much to say for this sequel. It was just kind of average, sadly, which has been a bit of a trend with some of the last superhero movies for both sides of things. Ant-Man 3, Thor 4, Black Adam. Kind of a bummer. Now, there is some good news on the horizon with Guardians 3. I think justified hope. As well as some more recent past entries, and it's not just been Marvel, right? Black Panther 2 was good, Guardians 3 was good. The Suicide Squad, also very good. Now, obviously, that's towing the line of DCU versus DCEU stuff. And I think also, let's not forget that I think the unaffiliated to any overarching franchise, the Batman, that was pretty good too. Emo Boy, something in the way. It's a goofy song, but fun movie. The end got a little lost along the way, flooding everyone, but good movie. You know, there's hope. There's a candle being held out for some good superhero content in movies still. But honestly, of these three movies I'm talking about in this episode, I don't think I had super high hopes for any of them. This next one, though, probably the nerdiest one, I think I had the most optimism for, at least. Maybe coming in blind helps. With Dungeons & Dragons, I've never played. I got into the nerdy card game Magic the Gathering in summer camp as a young boy, and that was my thing. But Dungeons & Dragons has seen a huge spike in popularity. This movie, I'm sure, is going to help as well, and especially with the rise of the probably biggest, I feel like it could be close to Big Mouth, but I might say this has more mass curb appeal for Netflix things. Stranger Things. For sure Stranger Things has helped out with Dungeons & Dragons popularity. Between that show and the ever-growing appreciation for good fantasy things. There's still a deep fandom for Lord of the Rings, even if Rings of Power is not your bag. People look still clearly into Harry Potter. Maybe the Fantastic Beasts movies not so much, but that game, people are in it. We'll see about this HBTV show. I have thoughts, but so does a lot of people. And Game of Thrones, people still care about because they're making a prequel. That's still a big deal. People want to adapt those franchises and bring new ones to the theaters or streaming services, and that's how we ended up with Honor Among Thieves. And I don't know if Dungeons & Dragons is a story in the obvious sense, because a lot of it, from what I gather, is people making up stories in this fantasy-esque world. So it's not necessarily a story being adapted, but it's a story in the concept of Dungeons & Dragons. And before we continue further on this episode, I mentioned it. AMC did make that really cool movie promotional die block popcorn thing. And normally I ask you guys for things like that Scream Funko Pop. Would love it if someone wants to hit me up in social and send one of those my way. Fantastic. Would love that. If someone wants to give me one of those dice block popcorn containers from AMC for this Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie, hit me up on social for that too. They seem super cool. But to who is in this movie, I think that hopefully helped draw some people in with a couple name brand type people. And it's a fun, good looking fantasy piece with magic and swords, and also has some actors. You know, that's why I wanted to see it. I for sure don't know any lore here, so apologies for not being able to reference any of that or speak to how the movie does those things. All I can talk about is who is in this and what did I think of the movie as a movie fan. I was going to say generic, but, you know, I'm a movie reviewer, so can't be that generic. But seriously, I am just a movie fan. Nothing more, nothing less. So obviously, the first big draws, I imagine, were Chris Pine as Edgin and Hugh Grant as Forge. Those characters' names don't mean anything to me as far as references to them or what they may reference. Obviously, we know any Fast and Furious legends in this one. Michelle Rodriguez plays Holga here. And of course, her work is mostly appreciated, seemingly by only me, on her Resident Evil movie time. I thought she was good in that first one and later on, but the good in the first one for sure. While I may never be blown away by Justice Smith, who is not related to Will Smith apparently, Googled it a few times, in things that he's in, I may never be like, oh my gosh, Justice Smith was great in insert movie X. I feel like I've never been disappointed in things that he's in. You know, I don't think he got a chance to do a lot in his role in the Jurassic Park later on sequel movies. And of course, his leading role with the voice of Ryan Reynolds in Detective Pikachu is good enough, arguably better than it has any right to be. Overall, this movie and his role was, I'd say, it just feels right to give him just enough time to shine. He's not the leading character, but he gets his moments, so it's got to count for something. And once again, pretty good in Detective Pikachu. That movie overall, pretty good. As a Pokemon fan, you got to respect Detective Pikachu. I haven't watched that in a little bit. Maybe that's still on HBO. Maybe I'll give that a goal. But I do like that he has some time to shine here. And he doesn't feel like he's fully overshadowed by Pine by any stretch. I feel like he holds his own. Having never seen Bridgerton, and apparently it's pretty hot and heavy with the courting, this Bridgerton show. Someone was just telling me about this the other day. I don't think I could get into it myself. I even tried Downton Abbey, and same thing, I just couldn't get into it. I would need someone else to make me watch it with them, and then I could be convinced, but I couldn't do it myself. But all I know about that is people like Regé Jean Page, and apparently he's only on for like one season, so you know, who knows. But I knew nothing really about his acting other than he's a good-looking guy before or after this movie. All I know is he was in this movie, and honestly, he was another fun addition in the role of Zinc. Also fun surprise, especially with talks of the new It show coming out on HBO Max, a prequel in the near future. The girl who played Beverly Marsh in the last two movies, Sophia Lillis, is in this movie. So I fancy that. She's playing I don't know, one of these magical type characters, Doric. I don't know the lore of Dungeons & Dragons clearly as well as I know, like, Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Game of Thrones or something like that. Even Game of Thrones could be a little tough, but if I've only seen the shows, not read the books. And I think her character doesn't get as much time to shine, but I think she does, enough, and especially because she is like the newer member of the group, so she's the newest ad for the audience. It doesn't have as much pre-rendered story, but good enough in this, and definitely good in the It movies. Still waiting for that 6-hour Muschietti cut, combining the two movies and adding in more stuff in. Maybe when he's done with this Flash movie, he can work on that project? It's a great question. It's funny, I was wondering why there was like a quote about Stephen King being pretty impressed with Flash, but now it makes sense that Stephen King knows about Andy Muschietti stuff because he did his It movies, so that makes sense. But I wondered first, like, why is the horror legend Stephen King caring about the Flash movie? But I get it now. So this movie does have some fun playing with narrative structure, and a lot of the time I think I just enjoyed what was happening here and the way this movie did unique creative things. And little or nerdy film guy thing, go check out if you can find some of the practical behind the scenes effects that made it into this big budget movie as opposed to relying on all the CGI stuff. And we all know there have been some bad Marvel CGI things sprinkled in as of late. The Thor Love and Thunder one, for sure, I think about. I feel like another one recently had some bad CGI too. Oh, of course. That Ant-Man movie that we just did that our last episode's on. Gosh, that was ages ago, it feels like. Terrible, weird CGI on the face behind the mask for MODOK. And if you look at some of that behind the scenes stuff in this movie, the practical effects, like there's some cool stuff that they did. It's some intense stuff. That you would have thought, no way they could have done that in the real world with, special effects, like, not as a part of it, but instead of just, wires and unique filming things. Just cool, if you want to check it out. To the plot, though, we start with the fun fake out of seeing our leads in jail after a job gone bad. I think there's something to be said about maybe, like, Dungeons & Dragons characters are always supposed to have, like, torrid, depressing backstories, and maybe that's always a big thing. Everyone has to have who's the best, most angsty backstory. We see a breakout attempt with humor, with telling a story of the past and filling in the audience on why the group turned to crime, and there's a family angle to it, which I think works for the most part. Their daughter, his daughter, and this is Kira, played by Chloe Coleman, and this whole story thing is just told as filler to just break out on bird person Jonathan's wing. And, like, speaking of birds, y'all play Wingspan yet? This bird game that is taking the board game world by storm. If you're looking for a new game to mix up family game night, do this. And if you want, let's say, I don't have all that space for board games, and I don't need another, check it out. It's available on gaming systems, including the Switch. I know that because I have a Switch. With both board game expansions and DLC. Some are here, some are coming in the near future. I have it on the Switch. My mom has it at her house. I've played it there when I'm home. It's pretty cool in both formats, so check it out wherever you can. Pitch over. You're welcome, Wingspan. But, to this movie, which has a bird person in it, but it's not about bird people. That's a small piece of the movie. This movie, speaking of family game nights, is just a fun story of a whole family coming together. It's family fun for all. And it's, the same thing that Shazam touched on a little bit, right? Of a family coming together, not necessarily all related by the usual methods, but kind of more by a circumstance. And the growing prologue of overcoming grief and adversity of losing a wife and finding a group of people to help raise your daughter until a family, look, something Michelle Rodriguez is super familiar with from the Fast and Furious movies. Like, everything was going good until they had a big bump in the road. Get it? Road puns. Fast and Furious. How about them apples? Really killing the game with some goofy writing here. But look, this movie delicately balances humor, action, and sadness in an expert manner. You knew their world of stealing things was never going to end up well. Now, I did not expect as much gaslighting to be in this movie. That was a big thing. And having it come from Hugh Grant's forge, gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, it just feels right for his character and his actor being a bit of a big, like a pompous charlatan. He plays it effortlessly. He was clearly a villain in the story, but interesting enough, even he has a redeemable nature. And it's not just, good and bad, the old Wild West days of it. He's just kind of a villain of circumstance, but there's a redeemable nature to him. But he does genuinely want to help and raise, that girl, that daughter as his own and give her the best life he can. Like, you gotta respect that. Good parenting. And he's actually one of the funniest and best parts of the movie. That helps too. Just being charismatic. The plot does take a bit to get going, to see what the movie's big overall quest and hero's journey will be. But at least before that happens, there's some cool action-y moments during the heist scenes before giving us the full meat of the story. It's nice to give us a little appetizer of action. And before I get going into the action parts of this movie, having never played Dungeons & Dragons, but doing a lot of listening, especially recently around my concussion times, to the Outside Extra podcast Ox Venture about the game, while this can be enjoyed as a movie without it, you will have a blast with Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, now available on Paramount+. There are moments that now just feel like you can hear a dungeon master's voice in the background judging players for dumb mistakes or trying weird things, as well as moments of players that are trying going either really well with a high dice roll or going poorly with a bad dice roll. Like I said, I don't know the whole thing. I don't know Dungeons & Dragons, but I can appreciate what it's doing more now, but I think you'd still like it without. Like I said, fun for the whole family. Now, if you're looking for just a fun action movie with an actor or two you like, this movie has that too. It has it all. It's a fun action fantasy movie that has appeal for casual moviegoers, and I would assume deep lore gamer type people as well. I think the hang up a lot of people will have is the title. Even after Stranger Things brought the idea of Dungeons & Dragons to more people, it still is a property that sounds super nerdy. And people are just not going to buy into as much as Mario, which, look, video games, Marvel, all that stuff was nerdy, right? Might still be. But Mario is so recognizable to a wide variety of ages and demographics. Some people are going to say, oh, Mario from the kart game. Mario from my childhood with the barrel throwing DK. Oh, Mario from Mario Sunshine, Odyssey, whatever it is. Marvel, you can't blink and not see Sun Marvel with all the shows, with the movies, the Disney stuff, the MCU, the pre-MCU stuff. There's animated, live action. There's so many Marvel things. You're almost nerdy for not knowing about Mario and Marvel things. Lame El Riz, as the kids say. But I don't think that's the case with Dungeons & Dragons. It doesn't have that mass appeal, general mass appeal. I think a lot of people Dungeons & Dragons, but it's not general mass appeal. It's still pretty niche. I think the same way, I don't think the buy-in when they made a Warcraft movie was there. And I saw that movie without really knowing a lot. That was a dense movie, and I don't think that did the same thing, where it was accessible to people who were fans as well as casual people. Dungeons & Dragons was both. Please, please watch this and tell others around you to watch this, especially because it's available on a streaming service now. Granted, a more niche one, but it is a streaming service. I don't think it's going to be regrettable for anyone. And if you do regret it, I'd love to hear why, but I feel like no one's going to watch this movie and say, you know what? That was a waste of time, terrible movie. I think you're going to enjoy this movie. Unless you really, really hate the fantasy genre. Maybe that would be, I'd say don't watch it. But I feel like if you're like adventure kind of action movies, this would kind of supersede that a little bit. Now, there is a good group gathering montage, too, of events as we bounce back and forth between the castle and kind of learn the true adventurer's quest. Robbing their backstabbing friend, save an estranged daughter, and of course, make some whatever their currency is. Gold doubloons, let's go with. Honestly, of the movies on this list, like, this one is just fun. You can turn your brain off a bit, but still get some stuff out of it and still feel like it's an engaging movie. Also, as the Chris off is always a topic of discussion of who the best Chris is, I feel like people got to put some respect and give some credit to Chris Pine. Great hair, lovely acting, and of course, as this movie proves, he actually has a pretty good singing voice too. There are some movies out there that will have forced humor, and this easily could have been one of those movies with a balance of, more action and some kind of weird jokes. Look, the MCU has been known for having some jokes that don't hit all the way. But at times, I'd say this lingers in that dry British or dark humor world perfectly. My kind of humor. Nothing better exemplifies this than the tease in the trailers asking a guy who's dead questions and, what counts as a question, just up digging more dead bodies as they keep finding the one. Who knows what they need to know. It borders on the absurd, but jumping from dead guy to dead guy, and just how fast and sharp-witted this movie feels. You have to like it. And while this is a tangent, totally forgot Bradley Cooper was in it. I think, for a short time, and yes, it has a play on words for his character, but when I watched this at first, I thought it was him in theaters. But holy cow, when I watched it again, I was like, that really does feel like Bradley Cooper, and had to look it up. Of course it was. Fun cameo. Now, in all the advertising material, Zenki Endar is played by Regé-Jean Page. Seemed like a big part in the movie. He's on the group poster. He looks like one of the main guys. All the marketing material, you would have expected that for sure. But we can't always trust marketing material, can we? Scream. Can we? To know who the main characters are. Weirdly enough, he was a bit player, come and gone through the story, but thank goodness he makes a fun impact while he is there. The action is great, and he, like others, feels like he would be the hero of most stories, good at fighting and all that stuff. But like Lord of the Rings, the hero of this story is not the most obvious. You could think the main hero of action, it could be Chris Pine's Edgin, but I don't know if that's the case. He's obviously not the most capable fighter. He's a leader. He's a good leader, I guess, but he's not the most capable, strongest person either. It plays with your expectations in the best possible way. Now, for the most part, every character has some growth. Some are obvious. I kind of like the one of our struggling wizard, Simon, working on his confidence throughout the movie. None of these characters are perfect when they start. Maybe Zank is, which is maybe why he can't be in the group, because he's kind of already maxed out for his arc. He's who he is, and that's kind of where he at. And some characters are going to get more depth over others, but I think this is one of those ones where you can relate to one or many of these characters. And I really appreciate his specific character growth as he's kind of introduced as this bumbling wizard, and as soon as we meet him from the get-go, that's kind of his vibe, and it's nice to see kind of that clear growth. I don't know if this is set dressings, if it's set pieces or something else, but man, there is something about this movie that is just so much fun, and really, I feel like there is rewatchability. And imagine if they made a franchise. I know it's been discussed, not announced, but it probably has a better chance, and this hurts my heart to say, over Fantastic Beasts or Welcome to Raccoon City. Not saying it's a competition between those three, I just think there's a little bit of a better chance. And that's tough, because I want those too. I just don't feel great about those happening. While the whole image of rolling going well or badly thing is in this movie, I think the Chris Pine song and dance that starts well but eventually leads into something from a horror movie, highlight moment of the movie. There are many, but that is sensational. Part of me wonders if this high Sun Games thing, and maybe that's a reference to Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know. I'm sure it is. But I think it's just a clever way to show some kind of retro D&D type gameplay as a nod to the franchise. I mean, they put a literal dungeon in front of us with chests to get weapons, monsters pursuing people, and people who looked like generic D&D archetypes of old. The wizard with the pointy hat, the barbarian with the helmet with the two horns, the dwarf with the big beard, just to be specific. And of course, there's traps and such along the way. It truly felt like fan service. Well, I didn't get it all, like the deep references it maybe had. It still felt like it was not just like stuck in there or too distracting. Now, it may not always have been in the cards for the party of characters to actually save the day. I mean, look, they're thieves, but look, they really are heroes at the end. Probably makes sense for the title of the movie. They could have ended things just getting the money and all getting out alive, but the save the day big fight against a true villain, it's a nice tie into the story to give some big battle fights to kind of give us a big action-packed end. But it's not aggressively like CGI monsters. It's like wizard battling, and there's CGI effects happening, sure, but also at the same time, you look at the end fight for this versus like some things that happen in the Shazam, you'll see a difference. You will see a difference and feel like one is better than the other, especially it feels earned the growth to lead to the big fight. And Forge is a great antagonist, played so well by Hugh Grant, but it helps that he's not like the true evil. Like there's a true evil to fight. And it's nice that in this group of four, like they kind of had to get better and do it themselves without the OP nature of the guy from Bridgerton. And that leads to like a super fun battle where everyone gets a moment to shine, use their skills that they have from along the way, and they even find a way to use Edgin's daughter, who at times has the same Sansa Game of Thrones problem of being a bit unlikable for a good chunk of the movie, being blind to the truth that we know and feeling like you're just like, come on, figure it out. But she gets there in the end, but it's not good to be the Sansa of Game of Thrones at times. As much as she grows better, obviously, but tough. Now, there has to be some emotional moment stuck in here too. And losing one of the core members of the movie, Michelle Rodriguez as Holga, it feels like it transcends the Dungeons & Dragons movie name and has more than we could have expected. But this end is a real, I'll say fun, but it's a gut punch that we needed. The notion of having a mother who we already had and having the mother we barely met but was teased throughout the movie. You know, they're both dead. You have to pick one. Now, the nice thing about this movie, unlike Shazam 2, for example, is the whole time there was this known magical thing to bring someone back, right? It was a known piece of information and magic throughout the movie. Like, the whole quest was to find this tablet to bring back Edgin's dead wife. His daughter could meet her mother for the first time. Sound great. That was the whole reason I did the first heist in the beginning. But Michelle Rodriguez's character is dead. A little quandary. Oh, who to save? But it's not like they didn't know they couldn't save someone, because they always could. But the problem is they can only save one. And it just feels like it makes more sense. It's all saying magic as a believable quantity, which suspend disbelief in movies, but it feels like it's harder having to make a choice as opposed to just bringing someone back because you can. Right? That's always going to be a superhero thing, too, of bringing characters back from the dead all the time. And it was a harsh choice. You know, the whole reason they went this quest was to bring this person back, and now they can't do it. But it does play with that same notion of the family you choose versus the family you're born with that Shazam does as well. Just does a little better. I don't mean to be a punch down on Shazam all the time. It's interesting the parallels. And like I said, I don't think the second one was great. I do like the first one. Second one just didn't do it as much. And it's a nice end this movie has. You know, there's a final fun little cameo of Forge getting taken in by Zank. So thankfully we got one more moment with our Bridgerton man. And the true best end, of course, is we're back to prison with a new character, Forge, who seemingly told not just the prologue, but everything that happened in this movie in the same kind of prison way of trying to figure out your sentence. And unlike the first one, obviously, where they broke out of prison, even though they had an approved pardon, in this one, it doesn't work. And Forge tries to fly out of the prison once again with a wing, Jonathan. This time, of course, doesn't work, having a window closed off. Really fun end to a really funny movie. And I really hope people give Dungeons & Dragons a chance, even if they're not savvy with the name of everything. So on to the second to latest movie I've seen in theaters. Like I said, these three had been a long time coming on a podcast episode. I'm gonna get to that other ones and try to get a little catch up in. It's been a I'd say a month or a week. I feel like it's been a life. But to the movie at hand. I didn't have a ton of expectations for the Super Mario Brothers movie video game adaptation. More so, it's the source material of Mario that is now a movie. And in this world of, it's not just where every video game adaptation is like a bad movie, where the highlight is Resident Evil, and even that was, as much as I like the movies, I know they're not as good. But now that we have things like The Last of Us, video game adaptations are kind of going on a positive direction of being successful. The question is, how is this? The box office would tell you it is very good, and I think it probably is. But we're not going to just talk about numbers, right? I want to get a little more nitty-gritty about what I really think. But yes, let's start by saying this is a movie for kids. And not just trying to set the bar low, because I think kids' movies can be good for all ages. Disney did it for a while. There's some better educational television than others. They can't all be your Mr. Rogers, your Sesame Streets, your OG Blue's Clues. Some of them are going to be GD Caillou. Ugh, Caillou. Speaking of El Riz, that's an El Rizster right there. But we got to set the bar and expectations somewhere. This movie was doing the thing where we have probably seen in animation movies of late, especially the non-Disney ones, putting super recognizable talent in a ton of roles to draw people in to watch. I feel like I would have seen the Mario movie either way, but like everyone, it adds another reason to want to watch. For me, at least, it was seeing what some of these actors would do with their roles. We know the Chris Pratt non-Italian thing for Mario. Donkey Kong is really just Seth Rogen in the same vein. But some people really bought into this and kind of brought something different. And not just speaking in their normal talking voice for their roles. Keegan-Michael Kay blends his voice with Toad without being the annoying Toad voice we're used to from some of the games. Jack Black, Anna Taylor-Joy, Charlie Day, they just work in their roles, be they changing voices or not. All three of these castings just worked with the characters of Bowser, Princess Peach, and Luigi. I didn't know if I expect to enjoy Day and Black in their roles as much as I did, but here we are. Lastly, small role, but as a Walking Dead guy, I gotta say it. And he has an illustrious voice acting career too. But having the King of Penguins being voiced by the deep, booming voice of Kari Paxton, superstar Walking Dead actor, very good, very fun. So, to the movie, if you played a Mario game or even have a vague understanding of the character in Mushroom Kingdom's whole cast of characters, you know the plot. From 1985 till now, some change-ups along the way, the water flood pack from sunshine, sometimes they're stars, sometimes they're sunshine, sometimes they're moons. He has a hat with eyes in the new one, what have you. But generally, Bowser kidnaps Peach, Mario has to save her while jumping on some things and around some things along the way. No shame, I love Mario games, just what it is. But this movie needed to be a movie with more of a story compared to the games we've seen in the early past. Obviously, the new ones have stories, but you needed a movie story that can be told, not just, baseline story, jumping around stuff. So, Bowser's trying to take over all these Mario-adjacent realms. Makes sense enough with the Power Star. Sun, stars, moons, more things have been throughout all the gaming storylines. Until, Odyssey, which I weirdly have only just started within a month ago, we never really explored why a few humanish characters exist in these worlds with turtles, Yoshis, Shy Guys, Goombas, Boos, Bob-ombs, right? All these Mario non-human characters. This movie kind of answers one of them, not all of them. We'll never really know where Peach came from, but still, this movie pretty much has Mario and Luigi come from Earth and some version of Brooklyn as actual plumbers. They're not great plumbers. They're fine, but not great. They are plumbers nonetheless. So this movie spends not an insignificant amount of time in this world, the Brooklyn world, but it never really explains why these adult men are so short. And look, people are come in all different shapes and sizes, but it always looks a little goofy compared to the rest of their family. But besides that, there was something fun about how we take these two Italian-American plumbers. Not sure how Italian Chris Pratt's Mario is, of course. And we get them into the colorful and fun Nintendo Mario worlds. They really lean into the scaredy cat Luigi from Luigi's Mansion's franchise here. And of course, as Nintendo likes to mess with the taller of the Plumber Brothers, shoot, they killed him in one of the Smash Bros. Commercials introducing Castlevania characters. He, of course, gets to end up in the not so lush and beautiful Bowser's Kingdom. Mario, on the other hand, gets to hang out with a bushel of toads in Princess Peach. Not a bad gig. The question was always going to be translating a video game into a story that made sense to people who know and love the lore, as well as people who just want to watch a fun enough movie without aggressive knowledge. Especially parents taking their kids. They may not all know about the whole Mario thing. It's just some animated movie. Now, most people probably knew a little bit about this, but they still would hopefully want a story that makes sense. So if Mario came from New York as a random plumber, he was not going to be the Mario from all of this, athletic prowess and everything else from the get-go. He had some jumping skills that was shown early on, but this movie is not free from an obligatory training montage. Some jumping, and a fair amount of wish mushroom to eat or not eat. We had the bigger growing mushrooms, fire flowers, cat suits, all the other fun power-ups. When we did get to see a power-up in action, they actually snuck a pretty good fake on there, and I thought it was coming too. Along with, of course, the strongest song in the whole movie, the original DK rap, famous for the N64 Rare game, and eventually it came back to exist in the Smash sequels, which this fight scene takes inspiration from the Smash games. And quick thing to the music real quick, not a huge fan of the pop culture music in this movie. A little weird, It could have gone a lot of different ways. Nintendo has so much music and themes. I never really got that. I didn't love that. Just gonna put that out there. But look, Mario and Donkey Kong in a movie together, same thing. At least they have them as initial enemies, mortal enemies, to eventual reluctant partners. It all comes back to your childhood or your great-grandparent, whatever age of when, the first game had Donkey Kong throwing barrels at Mario and Mario's just trying to jump around the barrels. And all that stuff is referenced and more here. This movie is laden with Nintendo references throughout, which you have to appreciate. Even if you don't know them by your experiences, you've heard of them. And it's just fun to see so much of that be stuffed into this movie. I will say maybe it's because you have to collect so many shiny stars, moons, suns, whatever, The idea of one superstar being the big item needed to fix everything and rule the world. Like, there's so many in the games, it just feels weird that one is the end-all be-all here. But they couldn't make a movie about collecting 140 stars in goofy, different little ways. Just, things I think about that seem like a small prize to rule over every kingdom. But of course, the best part of this whole movie, look, just like Dungeons & Dragons, maybe I just like music in movies. But in this part, it has to be the beautiful ballad known simply as Peaches. No notes. Jack Black singing. Love to see it. Sings in many movie roles. Great. Another banger in this one. I do like how many, franchises and characters they try to put in this. Some were just the villains. Bowser's Legions, the Toads. I think there even was maybe a Paulette reference in there. Maybe she was the mayor of Brooklyn, which kind of makes sense from the Odyssey game too. I think the question was always going to be fitting everything in, but especially from the trailer, how they were going to incorporate Mario Kart, right? Like they had original Mario game references, Smash Brothers. I'm surprised they didn't have any of the sporty ones or party ones in here somewhere. And they can build on this. There's surely going to be a sequel with how much money this has made. But I was curious how Mario Kart was going to be fit into this. And, it took a bit to kind of make sense. But just seeing Rainbow Road in movie-laden glory, like, you gotta like that. We'll say, speaking of pulling things from everywhere, there definitely were some Odyssey references. The wedding aesthetic of Peach and Bowser did look to be directly taken from the Odyssey storyline. The wardrobes felt almost identical. And like I said, the attention to detail for a massive, decades, plural, spanning franchise and IP. They put so much into this. Starting in the real world, this movie easily could have had all this stuff be like kind of Alice in Wonderland-y, right? It all takes place in this magical kingdom. And at the end, everyone is back to acting, like not much happened, but a lot of character growth and moments happened, but no one else really knows. Same thing, Lord of the Rings ended. They all went back home. The people at home didn't really have an idea of, the emphasis and hero's journey and world-saving events they did, but they're back home. And while it looked that way to start, right, saving Peach from a Bowser wedding, all good. The fight shockingly takes a turn and detour back to Brooklyn. This movie started off like showing how much more agile Mario is over Luigi, and there's a scene in Luigi's Mansion 3 right at the end with Mario that kind of has the same kind of goofy thing of showing how acrobatic Mario is, how Luigi kind of has to like make his way up there himself. And like when these two brothers are fighting, especially because Luigi doesn't get a lot of time to shine in this movie, like it looks like everything's, all hope is lost. Oh no, Bowser's gonna win, which, maybe he should have with that singing, and Bowser had some good points there. The Italian Stallions, they get the power of the superstar and kick Bowser's ass. Not only do they do that, but they get the respect of all of Brooklyn and their family, who was kind of dicks at the start. Like, they respect them a little more now. Now, instead of being the big Brooklyn plumbers hailed as heroes in, the big apple, they instead move on over to the Mushroom Kingdom, still doing plumbing, which feels like a bit of a letdown for all the work they did saving this world that they just discovered. But maybe being a Mushroom Kingdom plumber is more prestigious. They do have, like, so many pipes there. It's riddled with pipes, and like the infrastructure it runs all over the place like that. But it was a fun movie for sure. Was it more than that? Not so sure. But if nothing else, let's recap all three of these real quick with my definitive rankings from Letterboxd, the best movie review site you should all be using as fellow movie folks, and make sure to follow me, of course. And I have to tell you, these three movies were very different for very different audiences, and this took me some time to get this right. So here we're gonna go. Let's get it into it. Here we go. Shazam, Fury of the Gods. I think a 2.5 fits fine, right? Fine movie. It's I wouldn't say it's a 3 out of 5 because I don't think it's sitting in that middle world. It's like just below. There's okay spots. It's watchable, sure, but it just feels very Now, this might seem low, and I did think long and hard about this one. At the moment, I got Super Mario Brothers movie at 3, and I don't think 3s are necessarily bad. It's fun. It's a fun movie. Kids are going to love it. I think Nintendo people will enjoy it. I don't think I ever need to rewatch Super Mario Brothers movie. I don't know if that would do anything for me. But it was fun. Fun, fine movie. If they make a sequel, I'm sure I'll go theaters, watch it again, especially on a Discount Tuesday. But it was fun. But I really think the star of the show, and you'll probably know this, where I'm going, Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, I'll give it a 3.5. Is there anything inherently wrong with it? No. I think there's some characters that I don't love, but overall, love the story. The jokes are good, the action's good, the actors are for the most part good. It's a good movie, and I really hope people see this movie, get past the Dungeons & Dragons label, and watch this kind of fun action romp. That's a fantasy piece that I think is really good, and I hope they make more. I really do. They're definitely making more Marios. Shazam's probably done, you would think. But I hope Honor Among Thieves gets a sequel, because I think it deserves it. So that is another edition of the new to theaters catch-up type episodes. Not as new as it was. We had a lot of catching up to do. So enjoy this to hold you over until we get a more thematic episode. This was a long one. Definitely don't think we're going to have a longer one necessarily in the cards in the immediate future. But maybe we'll get some more cohesive franchise episodes. But we got it next time. We got to talk on the final of the 3 Guardians of the Galaxy films. I had a riot of a time with that and can't wait to talk about that. Most likely final of the trilogy. There's always a chance of another coming one day. They did make a tease that we'll get into then. But eventually, I'm thinking that next thematic one, John Wick's got to come soon. After the release of John Wick 4, the entire franchise I've somehow never talked about. And in celebration of the second coming of Keanu Reeves, we have to deal with that. We have to get into it for another episode in the near future. Love his Matrix stuff, and we'll have to break into his next, other big action franchise and see what we got there. Now, guys, if you're going to send me stuff, definitely do it. But let me know also what you think of this episode, what you think of these movies, what you're looking forward to. Let's just have some movie banter on social, or send me things like the Dungeons & Dragons Dice Popcorn Block or a Ghostface Funko Pop, whatever you want. And what have you been seeing lately on theaters? Let me know on social, y'all. Nick Nack Movies or @NickNack_IC on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and of course Letterboxd, where you should make an account, follow me, and we can share movie reviews and all that there too. All that in a bag of chips, and hey, I guess that's it for me now. Thankfully, we got an episode in. Gonna try to get better making these more consistently. We will see. Fingers crossed. But until then, cheers, and see you next time, cinephiles.
Are you not entertained?
I think this is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later.